Imagine a world where everything is yet to be invented. Writing, organized agriculture, laws, and even the wheel. A world where humanity is still in its infancy towards what we understand as civilization. Now think that, in this scenario of uncertainty and discoveries, a group of people in an arid and challenging region decide to shape the future. Welcome to Sumer, the cradle of civilization. Sumer is not only the oldest civilization in Mesopotamia, it is possibly the oldest of humanity's great civilizations. Located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in a region that today corresponds to southern Iraq, these visionary people transformed an inhospitable territory into a center of innovations that would shape the world. But how did such an arid place, subject to unpredictable floods and scorching heat, become the stage for the emergence of such an advanced society? The answer lies in the human capacity for adaptation and even more, in the imagination of a people who saw gods in every aspect of nature. The first steps of this incredible journey began more than 7,000 years ago, in 6,500 BC, with the settlement of Telel, a small agricultural community. Here, seeds of what would one day become Sumer began to be planted. But what makes this story so fascinating is that, in just a few centuries, these small settlements evolved into humanity's first cities. How was this possible? Was it luck, skill, or a little of both? Around 5,500 BC, the true starting point for Sumerian civilization emerged. People from Western Asia, who spoke a unique and enigmatic language, Sumerian, began to permanently colonize the region. They brought with them rudimentary farming techniques, but quickly realized that surviving the harsh conditions would require much more than simple planting. It was there that they began to tame nature, transforming chaotic rivers into sources of life. They built irrigation canals that brought water to the driest areas, making them fertile. In this act, they not only faced the challenges of geography, but also began something much greater: the idea that humanity could, in fact, shape the world around it. This initial period, known as Bide, marked the beginning of a true revolution. During this era, Sumer's first city-states emerged, small but vibrant communities organized around the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Among these cities, the oldest was Eridu, founded around 5,400 BC. For the Sumerians, however, Eridu was much more than a simple collection of houses and cultivated fields. It was a sacred place, the place where they believed their civilization had been brought by the god Enki, the god of water, wisdom, and creation. Here we find some of the first evidence of the impact of spirituality on social organization. Believing that their culture was a gift from the gods not only gave meaning to the Sumerians' existence, but also justified their dominance over nature and their innovations. This deep connection with the divine would be a fundamental pillar in the way Sumerian society would develop in the following centuries. Furthermore, the Bide period brought other innovations that anticipated the splendor of Sumer. A fascinating example was the emergence of painted pottery, decorated with geometric motifs and stylized animals. These objects were not just utilitarian, they were also an expression of cultural and artistic identity. This pottery, found throughout Mesopotamia and even in the Persian Gulf, is proof that, even in the earliest times, the Sumerians were already connected to a much broader network of cultural exchange and influence than one might imagine. As these early settlements grew, one of the biggest challenges was how to organize a growing population. Imagine living in a world without laws, where each community had to invent its own rules. It was a chaotic environment, where conflicts over water, land, and resources were inevitable. But the Sumerians had a trump card: the ability to create systems. Thus, even before they developed formal writing, they began to sketch ideas of centralized governance and administration. This was the embryo of the future Sumerian city-states. From here, the history of Sumer takes an even more intriguing turn. How did a people who started out with simple agricultural settlements manage to transform these communities into vibrant urban centers full of innovations that we still use today? And, above all, what motivated these people to continually seek progress in such a challenging environment? Behind each breakthrough was an unshakable belief in human potential, and perhaps a certain boldness in challenging the gods themselves. After all, what could be more ambitious than shaping the land, taming the rivers, and transforming the landscape to meet human needs? As we reflect on these questions, Sumer reveals itself not only as a landmark in human history, but also as a mirror of our own aspirations and struggles. But the story doesn't stop there. As we delve deeper into the feats and mysteries of the Sumerian civilization, an even more fascinating question arises: how these cities, which were just beginning to consolidate, gave rise to the concept of urbanization, at the same time they created the first temples dedicated to the Ur gods? And more importantly, what secrets about their worldview and social organization are still buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia? Stay with us, because we are just beginning to unravel the incredible saga of Sumeria, the cradle of civilization. The next stage will take us to the heart of the first city-states, where urban life flourished and the Sumerians began to write the most defining chapters of their history. So, are you ready to explore the next step on this journey? Imagine living in a place where the concept of a city does not yet exist. Every day is a fight against nature, sandstorms, devastating floods, and the constant threat of famine. But now, imagine that a people, in the midst of these difficulties, decide to build something that had never been done before, a collective home so large and organized that it would forever change the way humans live. This was the scene of the emergence of the first city-states in Sumer, a time when humanity began to follow the path of urbanization. Sumerian cities were not just clusters of houses, they were the realization of a collective dream. Around 5000 BC, the city of Uruk emerged, the most iconic of the period that bears its name. Uruk not only transformed Mesopotamia, but also redefined the meaning of living in community. Imagine a vibrant city with imposing temples, bustling markets, and a population that exceeded 50,000 inhabitants, something unprecedented in history until then. For comparison purposes, think of a completely packed football stadium, but everyone there lives, works, and dreams together. This was the pulse of Uruk. But what made Uruk, and other Sumerian cities, so revolutionary? One of the answers is in ziggurats, monumental structures that rose like artificial mountains in the middle of cities. Built on overlapping terraces, ziggurats were much more than religious temples. They were symbols of connection between heaven and earth, a way of showing the gods and humans that the Sumerians had grandiose ambitions. Each ziggurat was dedicated to a specific god, and the city revolved around that deity. Uruk, for example, had as its patron saint the goddess Inanna, the goddess of love and war. Now stop for a moment and think. What led these people to invest so much time, effort, and resources to build these colossal structures? The answer lies in the human desire to belong to something greater. Just as today we frequent churches, temples, or other sacred spaces in search of meaning, the Sumerians found in ziggurats a place where they could connect with the divine, give thanks for the harvests, and ask for protection against the challenges they faced. But not everything was spirituality and devotion. Life in Uruk was also marked by practical organization. For the first time, we saw a society structured around different roles and responsibilities: farmers, artisans, priests, and even scribes. In fact, this is where one of the most important innovations of the Sumerians comes into play: writing. The first forms of cuneiform writing emerged in Uruk as a way of recording economic transactions and organizing the growing trade. Imagine the transformation this represented. Previously, oral memory was the only way to preserve information. Now, with clay tablets, the Sumerians could record their ideas for generations to come. In other words, they began to build the foundation for everything we understand as history. But not everything was glorious progress. Urbanization also brought challenges that echo to this day. The increase in population meant more mouths to feed, more conflicts over land and resources, and the need for new solutions to social problems. For example, irrigation canals, which were vital to agriculture, could also be a source of contention between cities. Who controlled the water? Who had the right to use it? These questions often led to fierce disputes. Despite these difficulties, life in Uruk continued to flourish. The city was a true cultural melting pot, where technological and artistic innovations multiplied. During the Uruk period, painted pottery gave way to simpler, more functional pieces, while the use of copper began to revolutionize tools and weapons. Another milestone of this period was the creation of cylinder seals, small engraved stone scrolls that could be pressed into clay to create unique signatures. Think of them as the identity documents of the day, used to authenticate transactions and protect property. However, there was something even more fascinating behind the growth of Sumerian cities: the notion that collective work could achieve impossible feats. When we see the ruins of Uruk today, it's impossible not to wonder, how did they manage to build all this? There were no sophisticated machines, engines, or even tools. The answer lies in the strength of combined human effort. Every brick, every canal, and every temple was built by people who believed they were creating something lasting. And, indeed, they were. As Uruk prospered, other cities began to follow its example. Trade expanded along canals and rivers, connecting Sumer with distant regions. Products such as textiles, grains, and even jewelry were transported by simple but effective boats. It was the beginning of an interconnected economy, something we today call globalization. However, with this interconnection, the first signs of competition between cities also emerged. And this is where the story starts to get complicated. The Sumerians created the foundations of an impressive civilization, but they also faced dilemmas that resonate to this day. How to balance progress with sustainability. How to resolve disputes without resorting to violence. And above all, how to create a society that could last for generations. These questions remained unanswered, but they paved the way for the next phase of Sumerian history. A phase marked by even greater conquests, but also by conflicts that would shape the destiny of the region. Before moving on to this new stage, let's stop for a moment and reflect. What can we learn from the Sumerians? Just like them, we live in a world full of challenges, but also full of possibilities. Their stories remind us that, even in the midst of adversity, it is possible to build something extraordinary when we work together and believe in the power of imagination. If you've come this far, it's because, like the Sumerians, you value knowledge and the impact it can have on the world. Therefore, I want to invite you to join us on this incredible journey through humanity's past. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss the next chapters of this fascinating story. And if this video inspired you, leave a like and share it with your friends. After all, the more people know about the legacy of the Sumerians, the more we can learn from them and apply their lessons in our own time. Shall we go together? Have you ever stopped to think what a world without written records would be like? Where everything we know would depend solely on memory and stories passed by word of mouth? This was exactly the scenario that the Sumerians faced before creating one of the most transformative innovations in human history: writing. But what led these people to develop such a complex system? The answer lies not only in the practical need for organization, but in something much deeper: the desire to immortalize your ideas and beliefs. Around 3100 BC, in the Gemdet Nazar period, Sumer began to form what we know as cuneiform writing, the oldest documented writing system. It all started with something simple: recording commercial transactions on clay tablets. Imagine a merchant trying to remember how many bags of grain he exchanged for textiles, or how much copper he sent to another city. These records were the solution. But what started as an economic tool quickly evolved into something bigger, a way to tell stories, describe myths, and organize societies. And speaking of myths, it is impossible to talk about Sumeria without mentioning its fascinating legends. One of the most enigmatic and significant texts of the time is the Genesis of Eridu, which tells the story of a great flood sent by the gods to destroy humanity. Did you recognize any similarities? Yes, this myth is considered one of the inspirations for the biblical account of the flood. In the Sumerian narrative, the god Enki, protector of humanity, warns Ziusudra, a wise ruler, to build a great boat and save seeds and animals. It is a story that makes us reflect on the deep connection the Sumerians had with their gods, a relationship of fear, respect, and, at times, hope. But why would the gods send such a devastating catastrophe? For the Sumerians, this was part of the balance between order and chaos, a central theme in their worldview. They believed that humanity was a divine creation, but also a responsibility. The gods were seen as powerful, but they demanded respect and devotion, which helped cement the importance of ziggurats and religious rituals. Everyday life was closely linked to these myths, and every aspect of society reflected this duality between material survival and spiritual quest. While the Sumerians improved their writing and expanded their beliefs, society also underwent major transformations. City-states grew, and with them, the complexity of human interactions. During this period, centralized organization began to take shape, with leaders who combined political and religious power. Imagine a priest-king who not only ruled his city, but also acted as a mediator between the citizens and the gods. He was a figure of total authority, but he also carried a burden, ensuring that harvests were plentiful, that irrigation canals were maintained, and that the gods were satisfied. In this context, cylinder seals, one of the great Sumerian innovations, gained even more importance. These small carved stone scrolls served as personal signatures and were used to authenticate documents or seal jars of goods. In a world without pen and paper, they were the equivalent of a fingerprint or an official stamp. More than practical tools, stamps also reflected the identity and social status of those who owned them, with designs that told stories or showed mythological scenes. Who wouldn't want to hold such a unique piece of history in their hands? But despite all the progress, Sumer was not a place of eternal peace. As their cities grew, so did tensions between them. Competition for resources, such as fertile land and access to water, was constant. A notable example was the dispute between the cities of Lagash and Umma, recorded as the first documented war in history. Think about it. The same people who created writing and ziggurats also inaugurated the concept of organized conflict over territory. This duality of creators and conquerors is one of the most fascinating hallmarks of Sumerian civilization. As we progress on this journey through Sumerian history, it becomes clear that they were building not only cities and temples, but also a solid foundation for human civilization. Clay tablets found in Uruk, dating from the late Gemdet Nasr period, reveal the beginnings of an incredibly organized society. The inscriptions show plans for irrigation, lists of goods, and even indications of religious festivals. It's as if the Sumerians were leaving intentional clues so that, thousands of years later, we could understand their grandeur. But do we really understand enough? What else do these tablets and myths hide about the daily lives, aspirations, and fears of the Sumerians? And perhaps more importantly, how can the knowledge they left behind help us reflect on our own world? This is the magic of looking at the past, realizing that the dilemmas we face today, social organization, conflicts over resources, spirituality versus materiality, were already issues experienced by our ancestors. Sumeria, with all its complexity, is a reminder that we are part of a much larger story, a story that began with the first words written on a clay tablet. If you are as fascinated by this civilization as I am, Don't miss the next chapters of this journey. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave your like to support our work of exploring the mysteries of humanity. Share this video with someone who, like you, loves discovering the roots of our world. After all, the history of Sumer is the history of us all. Imagine a time when the concept of power began to take on a grand but still fragile form. A time when cities flourished, but incessant disputes over land, water, and control would define the destinies of thousands of people. This was the reality of Sumer at the beginning of the initial dynastic period, 2900 BC, a time when city-states began to consolidate their forces and compete with each other for dominance. It was an era of glory and tragedy, of extraordinary advances and devastating wars. Among the most prominent cities were Uruk, Lagash, and Umma, each ruled by its own leaders and protected by its own gods. But the relationship between them was anything but peaceful. Territorial disputes were constant, with cities often fighting for control of irrigation canals and fertile land. One of the most striking conflicts of that time was the war between Lagash and Umma, considered the first documented war in human history. This confrontation was not only a physical battle, but also a political and symbolic clash. Inscriptions on clay tablets relate how Lagash, under the command of its king, Eannatum, defeated Umma and erected a stele known as the Stela of the Vultures. This work, one of the oldest artistic representations of a military victory, shows vultures carrying the bodies of enemy soldiers, symbolizing both the strength and brutality of Lagash. This event highlights a central aspect of Sumerian society, the relentless search for order in a world filled with chaos. But how was it possible to manage these growing cities full of tensions and ambitions? Here comes the figure of king-priest, a ruler who not only led political and military matters, but also acted as an intermediary between men and the gods. Imagine living in a society where every decision, from building canals to declaring war, needed to be justified as divine will. This combination of political and spiritual power was the basis for Sumer's system of governance. Over the centuries, the organization of city-states evolved into something even greater, the idea of an empire. And this is where Sargon of Akkad comes in, a figure who not only changed the course of Sumerian history, but also ushered in a new era in world politics. Around 2334 BC, Sargon, the king of the city of Akkad, launched an unprecedented military campaign and unified the Sumerian cities under his rule, creating the first empire in the history of humanity. Sargon was not just a conqueror, he was a visionary strategist. He understood that to maintain control of such a vast territory, he needed something more than brute force. Thus, he established a centralized administration and promoted the use of cuneiform writing to record taxes, laws, and orders. Under his rule, trade routes expanded further, connecting Mesopotamia to distant regions such as present-day Iran, Turkey, and even the Indus Valley. It's impressive to think that, thousands of years before modern globalization, Sargon had already built an interconnected system of economy and culture. But the success of Sargon and the Akkadian Empire did not come without challenges. As the empire grew, so did internal and external pressures. Neighboring peoples, such as the Gutians, began attacking the borders, while Sumerian cities, still proud of their autonomy, resisted the centralization of power. After about 150 years of rule, the Akkadian Empire began to collapse, and the Sumerian cities gradually regained some of their independence. Among the cities that resurfaced in strength was which became the center of Third Dynasty of 2112 BC, 2004 BC, also known as the Sumerian Renaissance. This period was marked by an extraordinary effort to recover Sumer's cultural and economic splendor. The kings of oversaw massive irrigation projects, built monumental ziggurats, and consolidated a system of laws known as the Code of Ur-Nammu. considered the oldest code of laws in the world. This code established clear rules for society, including punishments for crimes and rights for citizens. He is proof that the Sumerians not only sought order, but also believed in justice. Another fascinating aspect of this period was the intensification of trade. Ur became a bustling metropolis, with goods arriving from all parts of the known world. Among the most valuable items were metals, precious stones, and textiles, which were highly demanded both locally and in distant lands. The administration of these commercial activities was incredibly efficient, with detailed records on clay tablets documenting each transaction. But not even the Sumerian Renaissance could resist the relentless forces of history. Around 2004 BC, the third dynasty of Ur was destroyed by the Elamites, marking the beginning of a period of instability. The Sumerian cities, once united, began to fragment again, and new people, such as the Amorites, began to occupy the region. It was in this context that Babylon emerged, under the command of Hammurabi, which would continue the Sumerian legacy while creating its own cultural identity. And here, a provocation. How is it possible that such an innovative civilization, which created writing, laws, and impressive cities, has succumbed over time? The answer may lie in human nature itself. Just as the Sumerians continually sought order in a chaotic world, we too face the challenges of balancing progress and conflict, unity, and division. As we reflect on this, it is impossible to ignore Sumer's lasting impact. His innovations not only shaped Mesopotamia, but also spread across the world, influencing later civilizations. And even with the fall of the Sumerian city-states, their language and culture continued to be preserved for centuries, serving as the basis for the identity of societies that came after. If you've made it this far, you must be as involved as I am in this fascinating journey through the past. Don't let this curiosity die. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this video with your friends. After all, Sumerian history is not just about the past, it is about us, about our origins and the patterns that continue to repeat themselves throughout humanity. Everything that has a beginning also has an end, but the impact of a truly great civilization never completely disappears. Sumer, with its rise and fall, left us something much deeper than ruins and clay tablets. She left us a map of what it means to be human. With our ambitions, conflicts, creativity, and ability to adapt. As we complete this journey through history's first great civilization, it is impossible not to reflect on how the achievements of the Sumerians resonate in our modern lives. At the end of the third dynasty of Ur, around 2004 BC, Sumer succumbed to pressures from invaders, such as the Elamites, and the internal challenges of managing a declining empire. The name Sumeria began to disappear from historical records, but its ideas and innovations continued to live on in the cultures that inherited its legacy. Cuneiform writing, for example, evolved and was adopted by neighboring civilizations, such as the Babylonians and Assyrians. Even today, when we read the tablets left by these people, we can almost hear the voices of the Sumerians, recording their dreams and challenges. But what made Sumer so special? Was it just writing, the invention of the wheel, or the first system of laws? Or was the Sumerians' greatest achievement their vision? They believed that, even in a world full of uncertainty and danger, it was possible to build something lasting. They faced floods, wars, and technological limitations with almost superhuman determination. Their cities were more than population centers. They were symbols of human triumph over chaos. Consider, for example, the ziggurats that still stand the test of time, such as the great ziggurat of Ur. These structures were not just temples, they were beacons of hope and ambition. They show us that, even more than 4,000 years ago, humans were already dreaming big, literally, building towards the sky. And perhaps this is what connects us to the Sumerians so deeply. They were visionaries, just as many of us still aspire to be. Throughout this series, we explore how Sumer laid the foundations of a modern civilization, from writing, which allowed us to record our thoughts and stories, to irrigation systems, which made large-scale agriculture possible. But we also saw the challenges they faced: internal conflicts, rivalries between city-states, and the constant fight for resources. These dilemmas are not just relics of the past, they continue to shape our world today. The fight for water, the need for fair governments, and the search for a balance between progress and sustainability are themes as relevant now as they were in ancient Mesopotamia. So, what can we learn from Sumeria? Perhaps the biggest lesson is the importance of collaboration and creativity in difficult times. The Sumerians didn't just survive, they thrived because they believed in collective strength and the human ability to overcome obstacles. And although their civilization has disappeared, their legacy reminds us that great things can be built even in seemingly impossible scenarios. Now, a question for you. What will be the legacy we are building? Just as the Sumerians shaped the world around them, we have the opportunity to create something that will impact future generations. Are we being as bold as them? Are we investing in ideas that transcend our time? It's a powerful reflection, especially as we look to the past for answers for the future. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You didn't just learn about Sumer, you were part of a journey to understand the origins of humanity. And that is something extraordinary. Therefore, I want to invite you to continue this journey with us. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos, where we will explore other civilizations and mysteries of history. Leave a like and share this content with someone who also loves learning. And don't forget, your comments are fundamental. Tell us what you think, share your ideas, or simply leave a message to help keep this space alive and vibrant. Thank you for being part of this community that values knowledge and curiosity. Together, we are unraveling the past to better understand the present and build a more connected and conscious future. See you in the next video. Until then, keep exploring, learning, and dreaming big. After all, this is the true essence of humanity. See you soon.